Okay, so welcome once again, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And my name is Ashutosh, and once again back with happy hour of coaching session. And today it's kind of a different topic which I'm bringing. Okay, so my regular topics are more related to coaching. My regular topics are more related to transformation. But today, I mean, this is something which I delivered a talk very recently for a group of senior leaders. And this is where the inspiration for this talk is coming from. What essentially is data-driven decision making, and why it is a buzzword. Just a word of caution here. I'm not going to talk about data science. I'm not really going to touch about AI or any of those things here. I'm going to talk about from a pure data-driven decision making, how data can be leveraged or how the power of data can be amplified and you can take certain business decisions. And when I say business decision, I'm qualifying it with a pinch of salt, because nowadays even political parties, by the way, in India, they are using a lot of data driven decision making. You name any political party, whether it's a regional party, whether it's I would say a state level party or a national party, whichever party you go ahead with, they have a data-driven decision-making process. So they have the entire constituencies mapped out. They know what is the configuration of each of this constituency, what have been the trends in last few years, which set of candidates won, which set of candidates did not won. So all this is a part of our data-driven decision making. So I'm going to talk more about that. I'm going to focus more on those elements rather than going into AI or generative AI or data or basically data science per se. Okay, this is something which I feel is required by everyone, whether you are a software engineer, whether you are a leader, whether you are a coach, whether you are a project manager, a program manager, or delivery manager. Data-driven decision making is something which I feel is required by everyone, each one of us in our day-to-day life. Okay, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ashutosh Bhatodekar. I work as an enterprise agile coach, a consultant, and a trainer. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I also have my own YouTube channel where you can watch the previous such sessions which are there and gain from those expertise what is there. The format of this session, just to reiterate to everyone, around 25 to 30 minutes I would speak, and then I would open the floor for questions. If you have any questions, feel free to ask questions by unmuting yourself when the time comes for you. Right now, obviously, you will not be able to unmute. So right now, deliberately, what we have done is we have kept your microphones off, but we will give you time. We will give you an opportunity to ask questions related to the topic. Now, before I go into data-driven decision making, it is very important to understand that what exactly is the difference between data and information. And I think that is something which is very, very confusing. That is something which many of us misinterpret. We use these two words interchangeably. We say that I need data and I need information, right? I mean, even in colloquially, we use these two terms very interchangeably, but there's a fundamental difference between what is data and what is information. So let me try to basically highlight some of the key difference between what is data and what is information all about. Okay, and let me take my medical report. Okay, the any medical report which I have gone through, right? I mean, I have tested my blood sugar, I have tested my BP, and let me go through my medical report and tell you what essentially is the difference, or what is a key, I would say, differentiation between data and information. Data, as the definition per se says, is a raw number by itself. Okay, and information is the interpretation of data. So when you say data driven decision making, that data driven decision making is not a raw data. It is an information what you are extracted from that data, and now you are going to interpret that information for something more insightful, And that insightfulness over a period of time will give you that wisdom about how to analyze that data. For example, let me take my medical report. Now, my medical report says that my blood pressure is 120/80. Okay, and without going into the technical terms, I mean, they have those technical words in the medical world, right? I mean, systolic or something like that, right? I'm not going into that. So my blood pressure, let us say, is 120/80. Now, this is just a raw data by itself. Okay, someone has to tell or someone has to validate that whether this is a normal blood pressure, whether this is a higher blood pressure, or which is a lower blood pressure, right? And we all know that as per medical science, this comes under normal BP, right? I mean, any person or any patient who's having a blood pressure of 120/80, as per my knowledge. Okay, again, I have a very limited knowledge of medical science, but as such, with that particular knowledge, with that particular insight, we say that this person is going to have a normal BP, right? So as far as BP is concerned, the information which is coming out from this raw data is normal. Okay. On the other hand, if someone has got a BP of 180/by 100, we indicate that this person is having a very high BP. That is a conversion. That is what is a key conversion between data and information. Another way to look at it, again, coming from our body only, the weight and height what you measure. So let us say you go, and I'm not even talking about a medical report here. You have those coin machines at various places, right? Where you can measure your weight, where you can measure your height. So I measure my weight and height. Okay, that is a raw data by itself. That doesn't convey anything. So whether I'm 100 kg, whether I'm 80 kg, it doesn't convey anything. But the interpretation of this, what is the interpretation of this? The interpretation of this is a metric called BMI, right? We call it as a body mass index, right? Or BMI. That is an information, what we call it. That is something which is useful. And the BMI is actually going to decide whether I'm obese, whether I'm at par weight, or whether I'm underweight, right? So that is fundamentally the difference between data and information. So as leaders, as professionals, it is not just a raw data which is of importance to us. What is important to us is what is that metric which converts that data into something meaningful. Okay, and you take any of your projects, whether it's a traditional project, whether it's an agile way of working or a hybrid way of working, just raw data is not going to help you in the project. What is going to help you in the project is the transformation of that data into something meaningful, something exciting, something I would say which helps you in your journey is what is going to be helpful as a part of it. So that is the first fundamental piece, or that is the first important element which I wanted to highlight, or which I wanted to showcase to all of you. And by the way, it is not just data information. As per me, data gets converted into information, information gets converted into insights, and insights get converted into the decision-making process. So it is DII, right? A DII is what I call it: data to information, information to insights. All right, moving ahead. So when we talk about data-driven decision-making, there's a standard definition which is given there. It's using facts, matrix, and data to guide strategic business decisions. Okay, and this is something which is a very exciting field which has grown over the last few years. And as I said, it is different from data science and data analytics, though some elements might overlap. Some elements of data science, some elements of data analytics might overlap. But today, obviously, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about data analytics or data analysis, data science here. Now, if you look at it, gone are the days when we talked about data in a measurement unit of megabytes and gigabytes. Nowadays, even petabytes appears to be a very small number, right, by itself, right? So if you look at the classification of data, okay, and this can apply to any organization, by the way, you will have data segregated by geographies. You will have data segregated by cultural elements, scientific elements, financial data, statistical data, meteorological data, especially for the meteorological department, natural data, transport related data. I mean, the circle or this dial can have infinite such circles in it, right? It is the ability to crunch that data into something meaningful, something which will help you to generate information, and that information will help you to take some strategic decisions. That is something which is very, very vital, or that is something which we say is very, very important in today's world. As leaders, you will find that there's huge amount of or humongous amount of data in your project. Just look at your project and you will find a variety of data which exists, right? And I'm not even talking about archive data. I'm talking about your current project data. There might be huge amount of humongous amount of data which actually could be residing and which you will have to analyze, which you will have to process into information and make it something more meaningful. Just to give you some highlights, so obviously you need data for your budgeting and forecasting, right? Especially when you're planning for your project for the next year. You need data from a marketing and sales perspective, right? Like how many customer proposals we got, how many were we able to convert, right? What is the conversion rate? Data from a risk management perspective. Is the funding allocated for risk sufficient enough to cover the duration of the project? And there we know, right? We have two important elements in risk management, right? There's a contingency reserve, there's a management reserve. Then we have data for research and development. So, I mean, these are just some of the examples. These are just some of the applications. But really, if you ask me, sky is the limit. Sky is the limit from a data-driven decision making, because there's humongous amount of data. There's a huge amount of data which actually gets generated in our work, right? And most of the data is lying scattered, which means it could be on someone else's laptop, it could be on someone else's desktop machine, or it could be in my mobile phone, it could be in my iPad. So the data is not something which is centralized, because obviously if it is centralized, then the interpretation part of it or the analysis part of it becomes very, very easy as such. But we all know that it is scattered data. It is not at one single location. Also, when you try to collect the data, you will find that the data exists in various formats. It is not at all a structured data. So the first step would be to actually collect the data and structure it properly. So what you see here is your data handling strategy, or the way you as a leader is going to handle the data, the humongous amount of data in the organization or in your project, wherever you are. Incidentally, there is a role called nowadays as a chief data officer. The person is responsible for handling data through the norms of the organization which are there. And we'll talk about data ethics and data culture also as we move along. So what is this data ecosystem all about? Data ecosystem is nothing but the journey of a data, right from its birth till its conversion into or its transformation into an information. So the first step obviously is data birth, the way the data gets created or the data is generated. And it can be through a manual process, it can be through an automated upload, it can be through a bulk transfer, or it can be through a batch process what is running, right? So we have data generation as the first step what is there. Okay, and obviously when we talk about data generation, you have to also have a place for storing that data. Rather than scattered, being scattered across various locations, why not have a central repository or a place where this data is going to be residing, or where the data is going to be placed here? Then we have collection of data, right? I mean, generation and collection. I mean, they might appear to be same, but there's a subtle difference between the two. You might generate data. Let us say you might be able to generate, let us say, 5,000 records of your employees. Okay, but let's say there's a recent acquisition which has happened, and you don't have data of those employees in your existing system. So that you'll have to go and collect it. So that comes in as a part of data collection. Then obviously you have data processing. You're going to sanitize the data. You're going to make it in one single format, what is there. For example, invariably you will find, and this is a common problem, what you will find, that the data is in a very, I would say, in an haphazard format. For example, you might have one record which has got the first name and the last name like this, and there might be another record where the first name and the last name is like this, and the third way where basically the first name, last name, and there's also something like a age of the employee. I mean, I have seen all types of combinations, all types of data unhealthy practices, wherein we get the data, and when we get the data, it requires a lot of processing. It requires a lot of cleanup is what is needed, right? It's not that you can use that data in an as-is format. You'll have to polish it, you'll have to clean it, you'll have to sanitize it, and you'll have to properly format it. So that comes in as a part of your data processing element, what is there. And then, of course, you have to talk about storage, which I already talked about. Data management, very important step in today's world, right? How are you going to handle the data, especially with a lot of regulations in place, especially with the GDPR regulation in place? It is very important that you manage your data properly. And nowadays, right, lot of data getting leaked from systems, or it was exposed to the outer world, or the data got compromised, or my credit card details were leaked out along with CVV number. So this is something wherein you involve data security experts, wherein you involve basically security leaders there in having a data management a process as such. Many times you also experience that, especially when you're working in a banking client, or especially when you're working with sensitive data, you may not get the live data from your requirement. For example, if you want to test some application, and for that you need a live data, you will not get that live data. What will happen is you will have to basically use a scrambling tool. A scrambling tool is a tool which will scramble the data. At the same time, it will maintain the data integrity, and it will present the data to you. So there could be a celebrity who I may not even know that I'm looking at a celebrity data, because it's a scrambled data which is there. The tool has scrambled the data without impacting the referential integrity, and it has stored the data at a proper location so that I can go ahead and test my requirements. So that is your data management of what is there. Okay, now these steps you might wonder that as a leader, do I have to do it? Well, you have to definitely, I would say, have a look at it. Is the data properly sanitized? Is it properly formatted? Does it have all the relevant content in it, or are there any missing links in that? So that is something what definitely you will have to do it, or you will have to do that checks. There will be data analysts below you. There will be people who would be working with you, who would be doing it. But as a leader, as a data leader, you definitely will be overseeing all these activities. Now, coming to 6, 7, and 8, this is where you have those tools which are available. And Excel may not be the only tool, or rather, I would say it might be a very insufficient tool to do data analysis, data visualization, and data interpretation. There are many other tools which are available in market. Power BI is there, Tableau is there, wherein you can upload the files, where you can upload the data, and you can do data analysis, you can do number crunching, you can do basically all the mathematical operations, financial transactions, etc. you can do. And you can then visualize the data through slicers, through pivots, etc. So that is what comes in as a part of your data visualization. And last but definitely not the least, you have data interpretation. What is that data telling me? What is the important message which this data is giving me, right? Is there something hidden inside this message? Many times we just scratch the surface. We just have a look at the numbers and we make our interpretation, but there is a deeper meaning which is inside, right? There's a deeper meaning around what that data is trying to convey. Much more inside is what we see. Okay, so that comes in as a part of your data interpretation, what is there. Okay, so this is what comes in as a part of the data, I mean the data life cycle. This is the data ecosystem and life cycle journey what we have. Something interesting there, no two organizations handle the data in a similar way. So you go from organization X to organization Y, the way they handle the data is could be vastly different. And needless to say, every organization will have its own data ecosystem. The way they are going to handle the data, the way they are going to manage the data. So it will be their own ecosystem which they would be having. So these are, I would say, some of the crucial elements, or these are some of the important pointers from the point of view of a data handling process, or how essentially a data is going to be handled in the organization. Okay, so that's one important thing we need to understand. Now, as I said earlier, one of the very important things in today's world is the way you are handling the data. And believe me, people have been asked to leave, people have lost jobs because they could not enforce controls. They could not enforce those security gates, firewalls, etc., to prevent access of data or to prevent data leakage. So data leakage is considered as a cardinal sin, as we all know, right? And as I said, people have lost jobs, people have lost their they have lost their careers which they have built because of the poor handling of the data, or because of incorrect assessment of that data, or the information interpretation of the data, right? So there's always going to be privacy vis-a-vis the data which you're going to have. You have to avoid personally identifiable information. What is personally identifiable information? For example, if I just tell you my name is Ashutosh, that is not a personally identifiable information. But if I tell you my name is Ashutosh Bhatodekar, then it becomes a personally identifiable information. So my full name is a personally identifiable information. My Aadhaar card number, my social security number, my PAN card number, driving license number, passport number. I mean, these all are related to my personal identifiable numbers which are there. I think we all heard about what happened with the Aadhaar card, right? I mean, there were a lot of discussions which were happening. Someone had put a celebrity's Aadhaar card on Twitter, and it led to a lot of hue and cry. I think we all have heard about that story, right? So it is very important that the data and information privacy is given that due importance. Whatever access you have to the data, and obviously that's where organizations sign an NDA. They go in for basically making sure that when you enter into a lab where this data is being processed, you're not allowed to carry any of your smartphone devices or any smart devices. You have to keep it outside. You can just enter, and even for that matter, any laptops, right? There will be some dedicated machines or desktops which will be given to you to handle such kind of a data. So basically, there will be an NDA, there will be a secrecy clause, there will be a penalty clause which can be enforced. So that is what comes in as a part of your data privacy. Those are elements related to your data privacy, which are very important. So it is very important to qualify what kind of data you're collecting. So when you're collecting data from people, what is the data you're collecting? How you are collecting, also very important. For example, how means that, am I collecting through mails? Am I collecting through pen drives, or am I collecting through a FTP transfer, right? Each one of them has got its own security strength, right? I mean, obviously, FTP transfer is more secure than transferring data to a pen drive or a hard disk drive, and or for that matter, even for that matter, sending by email, right? And last but not the least, who all will be given data privileges? Who all will get access to that data, and what kind of an access? Is it a full access? Is it a read access or a view access? Or is it also the ability to delete the records? I think that is something as a data policy you will have to set from a data governance perspective, from a data policy. Those are the steps what you will have to take, or those are the elements what you will have to take into account when you go in from a data privacy and ethics perspective. What is there, right? What is personally identifiable information? Is a personally identifiable information, right? Do not disclose that information. Also, many times we have seen that the way we present our data, okay, it can many times harm people. And I don't know if anyone has experienced this. And in fact, there have been riots because of this, right? The way the data was presented in our social media. We all know that, right? I mean, whenever data gets presented, how much of that is really a fact? How much of that is really a truth in data? That's why there's a new term called truth in data, TID, right? That is gaining momentum, right? So the data should not cause any harm to an individual. Imagine you getting a you getting your medical report where your blood pressure is highlighted in bold fonts of 24, right? Arial bold 26. Obviously, I'll get scared. At least I will get scared. I mean, why is this highlighted so big? So even the font sizes, the color of the font, it does matter the way you represent the data. That is something which is very, very vital, right? Generally, red color is considered as a danger mark, and especially in a medical report, right? Where your entire line of treatment is based on that. Any red color report or anything which is in red color is obviously something like a flag post there, right? Or it's a flag mark, what is there. Or nowadays they underline it, right? Especially when, let's say my cholesterol is above the limit. They are going to underline it with the limits, right? So the way you present it, are you presenting it subtly? Are you making it more obvious, or are you basically bombarding the information so as to scare off the person? That is also something very, very important. I mean, that is, and that is what I call it as UI in reporting. So we generally think UI and UX is a part of my screens, right? Whatever screens I'm going to design, or whatever web interface I'm going to decide, or a mobile app I'm going to decide, that is how my UI would be. No, the way you design your reports, and I'm talking about physical reports which are going to be printed, that is also very important, right? That the data should not be overwhelming. The data should not be scary. The data should not harm an individual or a group of people. And as I said, it could lead to you facing legal actions. It could be you facing some a lawsuit in the court, what you will have to do it, right? So it is very important to present it in a way it is appealing. At the same time, if there is a bad news which you have to convey, you have to convey it with that sensitivity, right? Because as I said, too much of fonts, too much of bold, italic, etc., it might basically scare off the person. In fact, there are guidelines around it. Which font you should be using, what is the type of color you should be using, right? Should you be using bold or not, right? I mean, there are many organizations which actually do not even allow you to make it bold, okay? Because obviously it is scary. It is something which is going to highlight some very important attribute in your report card, right? Or your medical report, right? So, and also with a disclaimer. Every report comes with a disclaimer that this data is something which is residing in our repository. This is an individual report. And that's precisely the reason why any report which comes nowadays, whether it's your bank statement, whether it's your medical report, it comes with a password protection. Even for that matter, when you're trying to download your Aadhaar card, there is a password by which it gets protected, because obviously it's for you only. Only you should be able to access that report, not even the data handler. The data handler also should not be able to access that data, or if at all he or she comes in contact with that data, there might be some really genuine reason as to why that information is needed. So these are the elements related to data privacy, data ethics, which are very, very important, right? I mean, that is something which we need to understand as from a governance team, especially when you're handling data, right? Of course, some key industry statistics, let me share those with you. 98% of the CEOs who were interviewed, and this was a survey done, they want data-driven decision making. Okay, but only 32% of these succeed. And there are multiple reasons. There are multiple reasons why these initiatives fail. Sorry. Okay. So that is what we need to understand, that the number, there's a huge gap. Okay, there's a huge gap between what is the expectation and what is basically the reality on the ground, what is there, right? So there's a huge expectation mismatch what we see as a part of this. Okay, another interesting statistics for you. Okay, 70% of the data driven initiatives fail. Okay, so only 30% of them succeed. And the reason could be myriad of reasons, right? It could be because people are not getting the right data, or the data source is not correct, or basically the data is highly unstructured. You cannot really convert that raw data into something processed. Those could be some of the reasons what are there, or the data is not representative. This is something what we find even in India, right? I mean, we being such a diverse country, we being scattered across the length and breadth of the peninsula, you have to make sure that when you're making a generic information out of that data, you have data which is a representative data. I cannot have a single connect data what is there, or a homogeneous data. It has to be a heterogeneous data covering the cutting across age group, cutting across the diversity related to sex, cutting across diversity related to region, languages, etc. So that is the data which I have to slice and dice, and then that is what I have to use, or that's the data which I need to slice and dice and use around it, right? So those are the critical elements. Those are the critical elements from a data driven decision making. And what this leads to is establishing a data culture in your organization. What is data culture all about? Data culture is basically about, it's a belief. You are trying to bring about a collective behavior and belief in people, how exactly data has to handle, especially for people who value, practice, and encourage the use of data, how exactly the data needs to be handled. What are the do's and don'ts of data collection, right? So it's a data culture. You have to bring in a culture of the way you're handling the data in the organization. So that is something what you will have to bring about. So some industry examples of organizations which have successfully used data-driven decision making, and later on I'll also show you an Indian example. Lufthansa Group, again, they increased their operational efficiency by almost 30% based on the data-driven decision making. Then there's a healthcare provider, Providence St. Joseph Health, which improved the quality measures and cost of care. And Schwab Corporation increased their speed to business insight, right? How quickly can you analyze that data into information? So these are some of the industry statistics, or these are some of the industry numbers which talk about how data-driven decision-making can be leveraged, or what are the ways by which data-driven decision-making can be used in the industry, right? And obviously, some advantages of a data culture include basically, you know that since the data is aligned with the business, so it's like a photograph. Any data-driven decision-making is like a photograph or a snapshot as to where you stand. What is the value, how you can utilize that data, what is the value of that, what are the strategic insights you're getting from that data, and obviously encouraging sharing and community behavior, right? So basically lead with data, as they say, as we all know, right? I mean, there's a very good saying nowadays that data is the new oil, right? Gone are the days when we said that the traditional crude oil was the wealth what is there. Today, whosoever owns the data controls the entire thing, right? It's not about money, it's about data, as they say, right? I mean, money is a byproduct which will come out later over a period of time. So it is very important to invest in a data culture. It is very important to invest in a data-driven decision making. And in order to have a data-driven decision making, your organization has to move towards the data-driven organization. In order to move towards data-driven organization, many people think that if I've got the best of the best tools or technologies, be it Excel, the Power BIs of the world, or let us say the Tableaus of the world, I'm into a data-driven organization. Sadly, that's not the case. You also need a very, very robust data culture, what I explained earlier, right? The culture, or the way you are going to imbibe the data values into your teams. That is something which is more important. So if you ask me, this data-driven organization, the data culture and the technology is not 50-50%. I would say it is 70-30, 70 for data culture and 30 for the technology piece. Because again, technology is something which you can master, you can have experts, you can hire those experts, and they can pick up on the technology. But if your data culture is weak, your data-driven organization will not work, right? I mean, your journey towards the maturity of a data-driven organization is not going to work. Okay. Interestingly, there's a very important statistics on that slide that organizations are investing trillions of dollars to become data driven, but only 8% of those funds are successfully scaling. You're able to derive only 8% of meaningful analytics or value from the data. So imagine investing in petabytes of data only to realize that only 8% of it is actually giving some insights, or it is giving some value at the end of the day. So that is where the investment is required. That is where, I mean, in a data-driven culture, you have to imbibe a data-driven culture. You have to build an organization into a data-driven organization. What is there? Okay, some more statistics from some other survey. 83% of the CEOs want a data-driven organization. 87% of CXOs want to prioritize becoming an intelligent enterprise, and 74% require data in decision making. But again, they may not be able to leverage this data, what is there, fully, because of a lack of a data culture, or I would say a deficient data culture, because of which they will not be able to, or they in all probability are not able to basically derive benefits out of it. So any data-driven decision-making framework, it starts with understanding what is a business problem. What exactly is our business lacking? Where exactly is the value equation missing in numbers? So it starts with understanding what is a business problem, and how we can try to solve that business problem, or what are the ways by which we can solve. Then of course it involves getting the data, cleaning it, sanitizing it, validating it, and organizing it. Third step is you build on the visualization, present the data so that it shows trends and relationships and interest, and generate hypotheses, formulate predictions, equations, etc. And fifth is conduct analysis, run statistical tests, some mathematical tests to determine or to prove that your hypothesis was correct. And last but not the least is communication, right? Very important, right? You have to communicate what the results are. Whatever good, bad, ugly, you have to broadcast those findings. You can broadcast it through an open forum. You can broadcast it through a dashboard. So all those elements come in as a part of your data-driven decision-making framework, what is there. Okay, one of the last slides which I'll be taking up before I show you some very interesting data-driven decision-making reports. So what are the key benefits of data-driven decision making? As a leader, I'm confident about the decisions I'm making. I'm not basically, by the way, there is also something called as emotional driven decision making. That's a different element. But I'm using here raw data, which is processed into information to make some decisions. I'm guarding against biases. Many times we see that even experienced leaders fall into this trap of biasness. You think that, oh, this person is like this, or people from this particular area are like this, right? So the data-driven decision making helps you to guard against biases. It helps you to basically set up measurable goals, find answers to unresolved questions. So there could be many gaps in your understanding, which a data-driven decision making is going to help you. And it improves the overall company process by bringing in a data culture. This slide, of course, has been picked up from Asana website, where obviously they have talked about this data-driven decision-making culture, what is there. Okay, now let me show you some interesting reports which are there, right? I mean, as they say, right, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? I mean, this is one of the websites of European Union. I mean, it's the election to the European Parliament. And if you see some very interesting way they have projected this data, right? The dashboard, they call it as a democratic dashboard. And they have tried to present it in numbers. They have tried to present it in indexes. They have tried to present it in the candidates who are there, and who has been the last 5 MPs of a constituency. So basically, they have tried to present it as a part of your data-driven decision making, because ultimately the proof of the pudding lies in eating, right? It's all about getting all the ingredients together, but how is your dish been made out is what this is all about, right? Another interesting use case from the industry, and on the left hand side you see the airline industry. Okay, so this is a data-driven report of an airline industry. as to how many aircrafts they would need. Okay, so basically, what is a global market overview? What is the GDP growth of the world's economy? How much will the traffic increase? How many fleets we would require? How many deliveries are in pipeline? And what is the market value? And so if you see within that 41,030 deliveries of aircrafts, what are the different types of airlines or aircrafts which are there, right? Regional jet, single aisle, etc. Then how is this $1 trillion value of the airline industry spread across the configuration? And now this graph, I personally love it really well. If you look at the bottom graph, what is there? This is a very interesting graph which has come out, right? It shows what is the total fleet current, which is 23480. If we do not replace, this will fall down to this much. Okay, so basically 17,560 of 41030 are replacement fleet, and only 23,470 are new aircrafts which airlines are going to buy. So I mean, they're very interesting graph, right? The way they have presented it, the way they have given it. Okay, and then of course, what are the regional contribution, region-wise, North America, South America, etc. So this is one of the ways in which you represent it. Another interesting way, Amazon Prime. Okay, so this is a 2005 report, almost 18 years old report, but it talks about 10 years of Amazon Prime, which is the most watched content. There's a lot of qualitative element in this data. There are numerical numbers, 20 million items bought on shipping, 211 Golden Globes original series. Okay, 23 minutes, the fastest time when an order was delivered, when an Amazon Prime order was delivered, right? And then they have a lot of qualitative data on the left-hand side. If you see most read book, then most wished for by Prime members, right? Most watched Prime video content, how many items a member could order every day of their life and still not order, something like that, right? I mean, a lot of interesting insights. So this report has got qualitative insights as well as quantitative insights. It's a mix and match. It is not just a quantitative insight. So which brings to the point that it is not just quantitative data what is important. It is also qualitative data, which is very, very important. Okay, lastly, before I close the session, I would like to show you something very interesting, and I don't want to market here for anyone here. This is actually the Government of India website, which talks about some key numbers which are there. You just select a ministry here, and it will give you some key elements about that data. I mean, it will basically generate some key dashboards around it, right? I mean, that's how a data-driven culture has to be built in, right? I mean, this is for the entire Government of India. Okay, so if I go to Ministry of Civil Aviation, it has got filters on it, and it will tell us some more information, how many passengers have traveled. I mean, of course, I think some parts of this are in making. And again, the intention is not to market, but just to tell you what is data-driven decision making, or on what basis you basically take decisions around the project, right? I mean, imagine doing something like this for our projects, right? Imagine doing something like this for our programs, right? How many UPI transactions, how many GST collection, what is basically the schemes which are there, right? I mean, this is a perfect dashboard, and if you want to drill down further, you can go ahead and have a look at it, right? So that's the data culture. That is a data-driven decision making and a data culture for all of you. I take a pause here for my presentation. But before I move to the question and answer session, do connect with me on YouTube. There's a QR code given there. Do connect with me on LinkedIn further. We can talk about it. And now I'm opening the floor for questions. If anyone has any questions, you can unmute yourself, you can speak, you can talk and share your thoughts around it. Those of you who are on LinkedIn Live, you can type in your questions. I will revert back to you with the responses to these questions. So any questions from people who are on the Zoom call? Good opportunity for you to unmute and speak. Anyone, any questions? Okay, so again, Aparna, this has nothing to do with agile. Okay, data-driven culture has nothing to do with agile. You could be working in a traditional project. Okay. As I said, in fact, I had made a vow today that I will not use the agile word, but anyways, that's broken now. But this has nothing to do with agile. Okay. You could be working on a pure traditional project and you could be having a data-driven methodology. Okay. So data governance, as I said, right, you have to imbibe a data culture. You have to have securities in place. You have to have firewalls in place. You have to make sure that the data is protected. It is not leaked out. It is not basically shared with a third party vendor. So those are the controls and mechanisms what you need to have. Many organizations have a chief data officer or a chief digital officer who takes care, who talks about or who establishes these governance structures in place. So it's usually the responsibility of a very, very senior folk in the organization, usually a chief data officer or a digital officer, who takes care of these things or who ensures that these things are in place. But then again, to answer your question, it has nothing to do with agile project or a non-agile project as such, right? I mean, it can apply for any project per se. Yeah, any other question anyone has? You can unmute yourself and speak. Anyone wants to have any question? And as I said, those of you who are on LinkedIn Live, I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. I'll be more than happy to respond to your questions once you have placed it there. Okay, so in the coming weeks, we have more interesting speakers coming up. We have more interesting topics in Happy Hours of Coaching coming up as we move along. So obviously, it won't be restricted to just Agile. There will be more such topic. And I thought that I'll give you a precursor on this. That is what I thought around it. Yeah, anyone, one last opportunity, any questions anyone has? Okay, so I leave you all with this. Hope this investment of time of yours for last 40 minutes was helpful to all of you. You were able to recover something out of it. There was a return on investment. I'm assuming you are getting out of it. So thanks everyone. Thanks for joining this session. Do connect with me one-on-one on LinkedIn or on YouTube, and I'll be more than happy to have your thoughts or views on this. So thank you very much. Have a great Friday. And for those of you in India, happy Independence Day to all of you. Thank you very much. And